Ladies, gentlemen, and raiders of all larks, this video game has a lot of systems and mechanics to get a grip on, and while some things are a little bit more straightforward, others take a lot of data to properly work out because the game just won't tell us straight answers. As a result of this, players tend to form biases based on their own personal experiences without full testing, and this results in people saying things like Snaphook blueprints only come from trash cans or car hoods, or Tempest blueprints can be found in one specific place. But the thing is, as crazy as these types of theories can sound, we can be sure whether something is absolute. Sure, say if someone says something only comes from one place, that is disproven the second it is found anywhere else. But let's say we're just talking about increased odds, increased chances, well then suddenly it becomes nearly impossible to prove without either full-on data mining or developer confirmation. And that's where we are with a lot of things related to blueprints right now. That said, while some things may sound absurd as a concept, the only way to really know whether it's true or false is to go out and collect more and more and more data so we just have more to pull from. So today I'm going to go investigate a few of the wackier and more interesting theories or myths that I've heard surrounding blueprints that I've seen floating around the community, and while most of them, even after doing my own testing, I'm still quite skeptical of, there are a couple of things that I learned while doing this that will definitely change how I look at blueprints and farming them moving forwards. First things first then, let's go over what we know to be factually true about blueprints and their sources. Blueprints can drop from Trials Rewards, which is a fantastic source of them that you should be working towards each week. There are a few blueprints that are quest specific and cannot drop at random. There are two legendary blueprints, the Jupiter and Equalizer, that only come from the Harvester event specifically, and aside from that, every other blueprint is capable of being found at random from essentially any container in the game, with some container types having increased rates of blueprints no matter what, which are things considered to be raider containers, which includes weapon cases, grenade cases, medical duffel bags, or buried caches as well. On top of that, increased loot quality of various kinds does seem to affect blueprint drop rate, which means things like night raids lead to more blueprint drops than day raids do. But also this counts for any room that requires extra effort to get into, whether it be a room that you can only enter through a breachable door, or a room that you can only enter through some sort of parkour, as those exist, and every container in those rooms has increased loot quality over containers on the map in general, and that can result in blueprints from places that you might not expect them as a result, especially since this does seem to stack with night raid bonuses too. As well, breachable containers in themselves seem to generally have a bit of a higher rate than standard lootables. Past that, similar things are true of both locked key rooms and puzzle rooms. These all, of course, also have higher than average loot quality as well. Aside from that, surveyors, the arc enemy that is just a heavily armored ball that runs away from you the second you aggro it, those actually have a surprisingly heightened blueprint drop chance as well. And it's also worth noting for the 6 new pieces of equipment that were added in the recent update, their blueprints do exist in the game in a technical sense as the maximum number of blueprints that did increase after the update, but I have not heard a single report of anyone finding any of these 6 new blueprints, so I have to assume they are not currently accessible. And these are all the things that we are absolutely sure affect blueprints as of this moment, so now let's get into today's tests and findings. First things first, before we even get into stuff, I do want to mention I've seen a lot of people say that they think blueprint drop rates just in general have been down since the patch last week that added Stella Montis, and my personal findings, as well as just so many people saying this, lead me to believe that that is probably the case. However, I do think it has been offset by a couple other things that we're just properly starting to understand now. Starting with the biggest find then, the biggest win from all of this, I saw a lot of people saying specifically places and map conditions for certain blueprints, multiple people saying that they found like a specific blueprint in one location and map condition, and multiple people agreed. So I decided to look into a few of these, but one thing that I immediately noticed with this is that many of these had one thing in common, which is the electromagnetic storm map condition. This doesn't indicate that it has any heightened chances of blueprints or anything like that, but I saw it come up a lot, so it made me think maybe that might be relevant. That said, the main spot that kept coming up with this as well was specifically on the Dam Battlegrounds map, the sort of apartment complexes to the northwest, the Pale Apartments, and the Ruby Residences together. A lot of people were saying between these buildings here during Electromagnetic Storm, they were finding very specific blueprints. I saw some people say Tempest, I saw some people say Snaphooks, and so that was where we started searching to see if this was true. And when you aren't contested for the loot by other players, this was, in our experience, a near 100% success rate of finding some sort of blueprint somewhere in either the Pale Apartments or Ruby Residence buildings during the Electromagnetic Storm map condition. Obviously, this won't be literally guaranteed, it is all RNG, but across 5 raids of specifically going to these exact places during the Electromagnetic Storm, we found 5 blueprints of varying kinds between the 3 of us that were testing this. One of us had a run where we didn't get anything, but that was also partially because the buildings were being looted by other people, but one of our run also had a double blueprint drop, so overall, 5 blueprints in 5 runs of damn battlegrounds apartment complexes during the storm, which is pretty strong evidence that something here is causing higher blueprint drop rates than normal, as that is just way higher rates than we generally experience. That said, instead of calling this one confirmed like on the spot, I thought a wise next step would be to check essentially just other general areas and containers and such, but during the electromagnetic storm still, to see if that was the outlying factor. And lo and behold, next electromagnetic storm raid that we did, we went to the hydroponic dome complex instead, went through there and found a blueprint in an entirely separate place. Then I also found the Snaphook blueprint finally in Pilgrim's Peak on Bluegate during electromagnetic storm as well, and that's a whole different map, entirely different type of location too. It's not even residential like the apartment buildings on Dam. And I even found a friend here in another raid that I did here, and I performed a bit of a survey asking him if he had found any blueprints during the current electromagnetic storm event, and he told me that he actually did find one in his previous raid in the exact same location. Then he showed me the container type that he found his in as well, so shout out to this guy for giving me just a little bit of extra data to work from. But while the sample size is small, when comparing my own experiences, which are essentially 1 blueprint per full raid done during electromagnetic storm, literally 7 blueprints across 7 raids, some of these times we did use nearly the entire raid timer, but the rate of drop speaks for itself. And matching that with reports that I've seen from other players about different things they've noticed about blueprint drop rates, I think I'm pretty confident at this point in saying that electromagnetic storm as a major map condition absolutely does have higher than average blueprint drop rates. And I even did go to the same places on night raids just to see how they compared, and a bit of a grain of salt here because the sample size is still pretty small, but I got less blueprints from the night raids in the same locations than I did during electromagnetic storm. So I would say it is very reasonable to extrapolate that electromagnetic storm has at least equal blueprint drop rates to night raids, but likely even higher blueprint drop rates based on our results here. Now you may be wondering about specific locations or specific containers and stuff, because I've heard people say stuff like this blueprint only comes from this container type and things like that, and the results of that seems to be a bit of a mixed bag. I've heard a load of people talking about the breach door room in the undergrade of Bluegate specifically as being a hotspot for augment blueprints, and while that seems hyper specific, it is one of the only location specific blueprint leans that I haven't seen people just immediately disagree with because they tried it and seemed to find similar results. And that to me means that enough people are finding these things in this particular place that there might be some meaning to this one. Take it with a grain of salt, of course, but it might be a thing. It's a possibility. I've heard various other attempts at trying to correlate locations or container types with specific blueprints, but nothing else that I've seen has had enough data to back it up or corroborate it, enough people saying that they agree with it, because again, the main thing is that these aren't blueprints that can only come from one thing, just one thing that people are swearing has higher chances than others, which is very hard to prove. Another one that I heard a number of people call out was Tempest blueprints being on the buried city during night raids in the Grandioso apartment specifically, and people generally said specifically the north apartment building, which is even more particular, and I tried this one for multiple night raid periods in a row and I didn't have any luck. I did find 2 blueprints in here that weren't Tempests over 6 runs or so, which isn't an awful rate, but that led me to my next conclusion. It's less about specific location type or loot type than it is density of containers that can have blueprints, because again, blueprints have a random chance of spawning in pretty much every lootable container, which is to say that there does seem to be some container types that just can't have blueprints full stop. I've never seen a blueprint in a fruit basket, for example, and so the best way to manipulate this is locations that have a high density of blueprint capable containers, which is stuff like raider containers that we talked about earlier, but it also includes things like trash bins, drawers, kitchen cabinets, suitcases, red lockers, breach boxes, or breachable lockers. All of these things are capable of having blueprints, and so any location that has them in high density becomes good for blueprints, and as a result, it can look like those specific locations are dropping blueprints at an unusually high rate. But it's not like specifically the apartment buildings on Dam Battlegrounds have increased blueprint drop chances, it's just that the Ruby residences and the Pale apartments are 5 tightly packed apartment buildings that have trash cans, drawers, cabinets, suitcases, breach boxes, just such a large variety and density of containers that can have blueprints that people are finding them in those locations more than they are in others. And all it takes is a couple of people noticing a bit of a trend where they find more blueprints in one place over another for the myth to take hold. More people do it, they have confirmation bias because they find one blueprint and they say, hey, this definitely works, this is a thing. But the truth is that every map has multiple places that do work sort of like this, some just better than others. It's all about the density of blueprint capable containers. Obviously we don't know for certain, for sure, but as someone who has spent an inordinate amount of time just doing blueprint farming, working out blueprint farming methods and seeing how they can be farmed best, this is the thing that makes the most sense to me. With again, the only exception that I'm really willing to believe even a little bit is the possibility of that breach door room in the underground of Bluegate being specifically augment blueprint drop rates. as I have seen just a strangely high number of people say that they got augment blueprints from there, which means that I'm at least somewhat willing to believe that it could be a thing. Again, no confirmation, but it's possible. And the existence of that does make me more willing to believe that there could be more things like this through the game. But I think all of this is very feely crafty. It's very speculative. We just don't know. All in all, I'd say the main result to take from all of this is that Electromagnetic Storm definitely has increased blueprint drop chances, despite the event not stating that it does, and seemingly even greater drop chances for blueprints than you have during night raids as well, which would make Electromagnetic Storm essentially the event that you want to focus on when you are looking for blueprints. And having messed around with it myself, and specifically blueprint farming during the storm, I think this is definitely the case. Everything past that, I think there's just no way to fully confirm. I've explained my best guesses at what's going on, but I think there's a lot of stuff that we just sort of have to say, this could be a thing, it could be possible, and let people try it and decide if they think it's worth doing, and just keep gathering data from players and talking about what they found and where until clear patterns either do or don't emerge from a larger sample size. That just about does it for today then, everyone. A sort of roundup of my recent testing and research in relation to blueprints and how to best go about farming them. Some genuinely useful new information about the storm, and then just my own 2 cents on a way to try and understand and explain some of the weirder patterns I've seen players talking about when it comes to where and how they found their best blueprints or their most consistent blueprints, and trying to just understand what's going on. I hope you've all enjoyed this, and let me know your own thoughts on all this down in the comments below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.